Hey everybody, it's Michael from Wahoo Comics here with another comic investing video where I share some investing tips and then show off some books at the end that demonstrate those tips in action. And so today we're going to be talking about the concept of pawning your comics. Now, this is something I never thought I'd make a video about, but about a month ago I had the chance to become an amateur pawnbroker for the first time. And it's a pretty interesting story, and I'm going to talk about that in the second half of the video. But even more recently, I've seen some other YouTubers in the comic collecting community make some videos where they were asking the question of what should we do if we find ourselves in a financial emergency and we need money quick? Should we look to sell our comics? Or should we look to sell other assets like mutual funds or cryptocurrency while we hold on to our comics? Or should we do something entirely different? And I think it's a really interesting question, and so I've been thinking about it a lot, but something I didn't see anybody else talking about, but I have been thinking about, especially with my recent foray into pawnbroking, is I think you could consider in an emergency situation pawning your comics. And so if you're unfamiliar with pawning, first of all we should ask, well, what is pawning? Well, pawning is the process of securing a loan by leaving some type of property with the lender, or who's called a pawnbroker, to serve as collateral. And so let me explain how this would happen with your comics. So let's say you're in an emergency where you've had tough times and you've gone through all of your savings, and then your car breaks down and it's a $500 repair, and man, I've got to make this repair or I'm not going to be able to make it to work next week, and I'm going to lose out on even more money and possibly even get fired and then be in real big trouble, and so I've got to get $500 somewhere. And so you look around the house and you see, oh yeah, I've got an Amazing Spider-Man number 300 and a 9.6. And I know this is something that I could sell for $1,700, $1,800 on eBay. And so you think about that. But then you think to yourself, wait, I wonder if I could get a pawn loan with this. And so you head to your local pawn shop and you let them know, hey, I need $500 as a loan, a short-term loan. And I have this ASM 300 9.6 that I could leave as collateral for that loan. And so the pawnbroker would probably get online real quick and go to eBay, see what he could get if he had to sell it. And he'd see, oh yeah, I could get $1,700, $1,800 pretty easy. Sure, I will give you a $500 loan if you leave this in my possession. And so then you'd work out the terms of agreement. I'm just going to make up some numbers, but it would look something like this. It would look like you leave that comic in their custody while they give you a $500 loan, and then you make the agreement that by the end of the next month you'll pay that $500 back plus $50 in interest. Of course, the pawnbroker is going to want something for letting you have this loan, and so maybe he asks for $50. What the terms depend on how quickly he thinks he can sell your item. So if it's something like an ASM 300, you'll probably get more favorable terms than if it's something that's just not as desirable. And so anyway, you make this deal, and then at the end of that month, you come to the pawn shop and you give your $500 plus the $50 interest to the pawnbroker, and then he gives you your comic back. But let's say at the end of the month, you don't have that money. You don't have the $550. So in that case, one of two things can happen. First, you could either go to the pawnbroker and say, hey, I don't have $550, but I have $400. Can we work out a deal where I can get an extension to pay off this $150 the following month? And the pawnbroker might say something like, sure, yeah, you give me that $400, you'll have $150 on your account, but then for the interest for the next month, you're going to have to add an extra $25 that you pay me back. So you'll owe me $175 at the end of that month. And so you could say, okay, great, that's what we'll do. Or maybe you're at the end of that month and you realize, hey man, I don't have the money and I'm not going to have it anytime soon. So either you inform the pawnbroker, you probably don't even have to inform the pawnbroker, you just don't show back up. And if you do that, then he just gets to keep the ASM 300, which then he will look to resell so that he gets his money back, and then of course some interest on top of it. Now, what are some advantages and disadvantages of securing a pawn loan with your comics? First of all, one of the main advantages is that you actually get to keep your comics. You don't have to sell them, and this could be important for one of two reasons. Number one, maybe that ASM 300 is valuable to you not because of its financial worth, but it has some other bigger personal meaning to you. So let's say maybe you and your dad had been big Spider-Man fans, and you collected together, and your dad passed, and this is something you inherited to your father. And so this ASM 300 is not just an ASM 300, but it is the ASM 300 that matters to you. And you know if you sell it, then you'll never get that ASM 300 back. You might get another one, but never this one. And so you really don't want to let it go. And so pawning gives you the opportunity to keep that book while still using it to secure some money, again, for a short-term loan. Or secondly, you might do the math and realize, hey, obviously I'm going to have to pay interest on this loan, but when I factor in all the fees that I have to pay on eBay, then the amount of money that I have to spend basically to get this book back is comparable to the amount of money I'd have to pay in interest to be able just to pawn the book. And so you might think, well, pawning, I don't have to go through all the hassle of listing and shipping and all this kind of stuff. It's a much easier, less time-intensive deal, less stressful, and so you could decide to pawn it for that reason. Another advantage to pawning is that you get cash immediately. You can get it that day, and for the same reasons you can do that, you can also get it with no credit or bad credit. Because when you come and you leave this ASM 300 as collateral, the pawnbroker doesn't have to do a big background check to make sure you're a reliable borrower. They don't need any references. They don't need anything because they have the ASM 300. And so you can get it right then and there. And another advantage to pawn loan is it has lower interest rates than like a payday loan. And that's another type of short-term loan that people look for. And the reason it has lower interest rates is because the pawnbroker, again, is at less risk by lending out his money since he has some collateral that he can sell if you default on the loan. And then that brings me to the other big advantage of a pawn loan, and that if you do default on the loan and you don't pay back, then your credit isn't affected. Nothing goes on any kind of credit report. You don't have debt collectors that come and harass you. No legal action is taken against you so that you're sued or anything like that. And so there's no long-term consequences that happen because of you defaulting on your loan. All that would happen is that you lose possession of your property, which obviously stinks. If you had that ASM 300 and you basically sold it for $500, you would, of course, be kicking yourself and upset about that. But that's certainly a lot better than having legal action taken against you, right? And so there's less long-term risk to you by pawning a comic versus getting some other type of a loan. But there are also some real disadvantages to getting a pawn loan. First of all, although the interest rates once again are lower than with a payday loan, they still do have very high interest rates, much higher than like a credit card or a traditional bank loan. And so you would definitely look to put something on your credit card before you look to pawn a comic. But let's say, again, you don't have good credit, or you've maxed out your credit cards because, again, you're in this emergency situation where you just had extra bills, then you could consider pawning your comics. But again, they do have a very high interest rate, and so it's something that you should definitely just do in an emergency situation. And then the second big disadvantage is, and this is similar to payday loans. Some people, there's an interesting discussion that can be had if payday loans are predatory, and the reason that some would argue for that, and I think there's a good case either way, is that when people get those types of loans, when they get that cash quick, then you can kind of, I don't know what the right word for it is, kind of like addicted to getting it so easy. And so with pawning, it can be the same thing. You take that ASM 300 in, you get $500, and it's just so easy that then after you pay it back a couple weeks later, you're like, oh man, it was nice to get that $500 real quick. I can use another quick bonus like that. And so you take it in and get that $500, but then you're always obviously having to pay back more than you got. And so in the long term, you're losing a lot of money. But it can be easy to get caught up in that cycle. And so it's a real disadvantage for that reason. So again, I don't recommend pawning your comics as a normal practice. But if we're in an emergency situation where we have to get cash quickly, it's at least something to be considered. Now, that brings me to the story of how I have become an amateur pawnbroker. So if you've been watching my videos, one of my good friends who I've done some videos with is Marco from Switch Comics. And if you've been watching his videos, a couple of months ago, he got an awesome opportunity when the comic shop that he works for got in one of the top 2 personal grail books for him. It's Journey into Mystery number 83, which of course is the first appearance of Thor. And because he works at that shop, he gets a 15% discount. And so he realized, man, this is probably the best chance I'll ever have to own this book, and I really want it. And the owner of the store, his boss, was kind enough to say, hey, I know you want this book, you've been a good employee, I'll give you a month to get the money to me before I make this book available to the public. And so Marco's like, oh great, this is awesome. And so he knew, obviously it's a really pricey book, so that he'd have to sell some of his comics to be able to afford that book. And so he listed a lot of comics on eBay and Instagram, and he sold a lot. He sold quite a bit, but you've got to sell a lot to get a JIM 83. And so and this is one of the problems with comics as an asset. If you need money quickly, this may be for another video, they're limited in how liquid they are, especially if you want full market value. You can put up any book for an auction and get something for it, but to get full market value, it's probably going to sit on eBay for some period of time, or Instagram or wherever. And so he had made some money, but not all. And about a week before kind of the deadline of paying for the book was coming, I checked in and I said, hey, how's it going? And I mentioned there was a certain book that he had that I was interested in. It's not one I was really targeting at the moment, but it is a book I wanted to have at some point. And he's obviously been a great friend to me. And so I said, if you're getting to that deadline, and basically me buying that book would put you over the top of what you need, obviously if it remains unsold, and that's what will let you get the Journey into Mystery, then hey, I'll buy it, and I'll be happy to. Again, it's a book that I want. It just wasn't one that I was looking at that moment. And he said, oh, great. And so then a day or two before the deadline, he checked back in and said, yeah, man, it hasn't sold, and I still have a little bit of ways to go. And so I said, well, how much more do you need to be able to buy the JIM? And he told me the numbers, and I realized, well, hey, me buying that book isn't going to get him all the way. And so I said, well, what are you going to do if I buy this book? What are you going to do to make up the rest of the money? And so he said, well, unfortunately, he's going to have to take his books and sell them to his LCS, and he would get about 60% of fair market value for them. And obviously that's not what he wants to do. First of all, they're books he didn't even want to sell. They were important to him, but not as important as a JIM 83. And secondly, obviously all of us want as close to full market value as we can, and not 60% if we can avoid that. And so I put on my thinking cap, and I was like, well, man, I really want to help you get this book. Let me just kind of think about it for the next day or two. And so I thought about it, and for some reason, pawning the books came to me. And so I got back in touch with him. And I didn't actually tell him this part, but is a good month, April, for him to be in this position because it's tax season, and I have a lot of kids. And if any of you are dads out there, the past 2 years were crazy with the amount of COVID relief we got, and so I had just gotten some extra money in COVID relief, and so that's why I had a little more even kind of disposable money than I normally would. And so I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, man, I can't just straight. I don't think I can just straight buy all those books from you. I'd like to, and I actually did consider buying them at not full market value, but better than his shop did. But as I thought about it, I think that's just too much. But I said, hey, what about you pawn your books to me, and you tally up a list of what you have, and I will send you 75% of the fair market value of whatever the books are, and you send them to me. And in a traditional pawn, you're probably not going to get that good of a return. You're more like, depending on how hot the item is, 25 to 60%. And then I said, and if you can pay me back in 3 months, then it'll just be interest free. I'm just doing it as a favor to you. Again, you've been a good friend to me. And so I went online, looked up how to make pawn contracts, and even made a contract with him. And so he shipped me quite a few books, and I'm going to show them off to you. And I sent him the money, and he's got 3 months, and we're not quite to the end of the first month now. This is a few weeks ago, to pay me back, and then I'll send these books back if he does. And he doesn't have to do this, but he's sending me payments as we go, and so it's been especially nice for my wife. She's like, "You're sending how much money to this guy?" Because she doesn't know him, and so it took a little bit of convincing. Like, trust me, Katie. He's a good guy. We're friends. Well, thinking, man, Marco, you better be a good friend. But again, the risk is really small because I've got all these books that I could sell if for whatever reason he defaulted on the loan. Let's say like some emergency happened for him. I don't think he would plan to do that. But let's say at the end of the 3 months he hasn't paid back, then we'd renegotiate or whatever. I'm not worried about it. But anyway, so he sent me some awesome books, and and again, I wasn't trying to make money, but something he did do with one of the book I was looking to consider buying, and that's the one I'll show you first. He ended up actually selling this one to me, but at an even greater discount than he would have, and that's kind of payment to me for doing this pawn. But even if he hadn't done this, I was happy to do it. Again, I had some disposable cash, but it's kind of cool. If you are looking to pawn your comics, I won't give you as good a deal as I did Marca, but I'll give you a better deal than another pawnbroker. I've really been thinking about it. I'm always thinking of new kind of side hustles to develop. But anyway, let's get into the books. So this is the one that is now my book that I got a great deal on. Amazing Spider-Man number 50 in a CGC 5.0. And this is a book I've wanted for a few reasons. Number one, if you've watched my videos, I'm putting together in the long term a full run of Amazing Spider-Man. And this is one of the biggest Silver Age keys to pick up. And the reason is because of other reasons I love this book. It's got this iconic cover. But even more importantly for me, because I love this character, is the first appearance of the Kingpin. And so this book got really hot a few months ago when, spoilers, it's probably long enough, but fast forward 30 seconds if you haven't seen any recent shows. He was in Hawkeye, and it's kind of dipped since then. That's how books usually do. But I think that character has a long life in the MCU. And it's a character I love, and it's ASM, very safe, great book. And so if you're looking for this book, I think sometime in the next few months is probably a great time to pick this up before we start getting rumors of Kingpin coming again. So this is the one that I'll keep, and I'll quickly go through the other ones because there's a lot of cool books. But I will be sending these back to Marco in 2.5 months or whatever, once he finishes paying back the loan. So first of all, we have Venom number 3, Signature Series, signed by Donnie Cates. And of course, this contains the first full appearance of Null. We have Miss Marvel number 18 and a 9.2, which contains the first full appearance of Mystique. And all these, I think, are good books to be investing in. I told him had to, let's make sure we get some good books in here, and once if something went bad, that I could sell. We have Daredevil number 10, CGC 9.8, the origin, and I think the first cover appearance of Echo. Then we have, this is a really nice one. I would almost want to just buy this one, but yeah, the ASM 50 is good enough for now. X-Men number 12, first appearance of the Juggernaut, 5.5. Another awesome Spider-Man. I have my own copy of this at CGC now. Number 252, this classic cover, the 9.0. Another great book that I already own, Tomb of Dracula, number 1, 6.0. Also, mine's at CGC right now. I've got 2 at CGC actually. Another book that I have 2 of at CGC. This is CBS She-Hulk 8.5, number 1. And then the final book, Marvel number 6, which is a variant. I can't remember what the ratio is on this. I think maybe 1 in 25, but this awesome Silver Surfer cover. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. It's been kind of an interesting month thinking about this concept, but I've really liked it. If you like this content, even if you didn't, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please consider doing so. Comment, tell me what you think you should do, or what you would do in a real financial situation with your comic books or with other assets. And like the video, all those kinds of things. So again, I hope you got something out of it. I sure did, and look forward to seeing you in the next one.